Okay, let's talk about the first two chronological stages of development, our prenatal development and newborn development. So we're going to start prenatal development at the moment of conception. So this is the moment when a male sperm fertilizes a female's egg. And at this point that sperm wins the race and enters into the egg, which is down here in this picture, the egg actually creates an outer coating of hormones that blocks all the other sperm from entering into the egg. Women are born with all of the eggs that they will ever have, but only about 1 in 5,000, about every 5,000 actually mature into full-blown eggs that you will release. Men start producing sperm at puberty and then produce it 24/7 until they die. So they can reproduce until they die after puberty. So genetically, what is happening? So the new one cell entities of where the sperm meets the egg contains 23 pair of chromosomes. Okay, so there's pairs. There's technically 46, right? So 23 come from the egg, 23 come from the sperm. And then they combine to create a zygote. And that zygote then will eventually form into the baby. Okay, so each chromosome, each of these 23 pairs, contains thousands of genes. And these genes, either individually or in combination with one another, produce particular characteristics of a person. So DNA is the smallest unit of information that we have in our body. Then we have genes, then we have chromosomes. So this is in increasingly large order, right? So DNA is the smallest, then genes, then chromosomes. So chromosomes are made up of genes. Genes are made up of strands of DNA sequences, okay? Some genes are responsible for the development of systems like our heart and our circulatory system, which is our blood, our brain, our lungs, etc. But others make our characteristics that make us unique, like our eye color, our height, our facial features. So each gene does something different, and sometimes those genes work in combination with other genes in order to make you who you are. Sex is also determined by a combination of genes, and it is located on the 23rd chromosome. Okay, prenatal development. So a zygote is a fertilized egg, and actually only about half of zygotes survive the first 2 weeks. So what that means is that you can have a fertilized egg and then not become pregnant. Okay, that zygote doesn't implant into your uterus, and then you will not have a viable pregnancy. But after that second week, we now call the zygote an embryo. And by 4 weeks, the embryo has developed a rudimentary heart, brain, and intestinal tract. They're very primitive, but they can be seen and distinguished. And in fact, at that 4-week stage is about the very first time that on an ultrasound you can see a heartbeat. By 8 weeks, which is this picture over here, this is actually Bailey, my second baby. By 8 weeks, the embryo is about an inch long, has arms and legs, and they're pretty distinct. So I like to call this the gummy bear stage, because that's what they look like. So here is her head, here's her little arm buds, her little feet buds down here. So that's kind of the next stage that we see. So here's just kind of like a better picture, so you can kind of see what it looks like. So at the moment of fertilization, this is what it looks like. Right here is the egg, and the sperm has entered into it. You can already see some of the cells are starting to divide. At 4 weeks, looks like a tadpole, right? Here's a tail that eventually will form into legs. And then at 8 weeks over here, looks like a gummy bear or an alien, but you can definitely see arms and legs. Okay, the next stage is the fetal stage. This is from about 8 weeks to birth. At about 8 or 9 weeks, depending on the development, we now call the baby a fetus. And around 4 months, which is usually around the 20-week mark, sometimes a little bit later, sometimes 24 weeks, fetal movement is actually strong enough for a mom to feel the movement. Around 6 months, eyelids are open and the fetus has well-developed grasp and taste buds, meaning they can grasp their hands. You'll often see babies sucking their thumb. This picture over here is Rory. This is at 20 weeks, almost 21 weeks, and you can see her features have definitely formed, right? You can see a nose, you can see her lips here, her big belly, her spine. So by about that 20-week mark, about halfway, babies are looking fully like humans. The age of viability, or the viability mark, is usually about 24 weeks. And what that means, that there's about a 50% chance of a preemie baby born at 24 weeks that they will survive. So usually moms, when they reach that 24-week mark, know that their baby has a fairly good chance of surviving outside of the womb. And as that baby, as you pass that 24-week marks, that percentage increases each week of the baby surviving. Fetuses continue to grow and gain weight during the last 2 months. And at the end of a normal 38-week or 9.5-month pregnancy, fetuses typically weigh around 7 pounds and about 20 inches of length. However, that's average. Bailey, my second, was 9 pounds, so much larger than that. And we say 38 weeks because actually the first 2 weeks of pregnancy, technically you're not pregnant. They're before menstruation or ovulation even happen. So the first 2 weeks are before ovulation, so we don't necessarily count those when we're actually talking about the age of a fetus. Okay, so genetic factors are the major cause of developmental issues in children. So the major cause of genetic defects is faulty genes or chromosomes. Some of the things that are resulting of that, some of the disorders, genetic disorders that we have, are PKU, which is an inability to break down protein, Tay-Sachs disease, which is the body's inability to break down fat, which then causes the fat to build up and destroy the brain and nerve cells, eventually until the nervous system shuts down completely. Usually we start to see this happening around 4 to 6 months of age, and then children don't usually survive past the age of 5. If both parents carry a genetic defect of Tay-Sachs disease, a child has a 1 in 4 chance of being born with the disease. It seems to occur most frequently in Central and Eastern European Jews and their descendants. And then Down syndrome. Down syndrome occurs when a zygote, so remember, a zygote is those first 2 weeks when a fertilized cell happens. So it occurs when a zygote receives an extra chromosome at the moment of conception. It causes intellectual disability, and usually in the mild to moderate range. However, it can be extreme sometimes. Usually it's related to a mother's age. Down syndrome is more common in babies who are born to mothers over the age of 35. Some of the characteristics are seen in the face, including an upward slanted eyes, small noses, ears, and mouth, and then sometimes small hands and short necks. Often, Down syndrome is also accompanied by other health problems, specifically heart problems, vision problems, and hearing issues as well. Okay, the environment. We talked about teratogens a little bit before in our last video. However, we're going to talk a little bit more specifically. So teratogens are those environmental agents such as drugs, chemicals, viruses, or other factors that can produce birth defects. Okay, so remember we talked about stress, alcohol, drugs, illness. All of those things can produce birth defects. So illnesses that a mother has while she's pregnant, so German measles or rubella, can cause blindness, deafness, heart abnormalities, and even stillbirth, which is when a baby is born dead. Syphilis can cause mental retardation, physical deformities, and then miscarriages for the mother. And then AIDS can be passed to a child prior to birth. Some other teratogens are the use of drugs. So illegal drugs like cocaine can result in a baby being born addicted to the drug. We've talked about that a little bit. And then also legal drugs can cause fetal abnormalities, specifically alcohol. Fetal alcohol syndrome is a condition that results in mental and growth retardation. So babies are born abnormally small. Their eyes are very small. Their nose is upturned, and then they often have a small or abnormally formed brain. Most babies born with fetal alcohol syndrome have some degree of mental retardation and may exhibit problems with their attention span, learning, coordination, and behavior. Mostly because those things happen in our prefrontal cortex, and those are things that get, and that's a part of the brain that is very complex, and so that is that doesn't get fully developed because of the fetal alcohol syndrome. Smoking can lead to fewer nutrients received by the fetus, which results in lower birth weight, and then heavy smoking can affect brain development as well. So here are some pictures of some newborn babies. I know it's sometimes fun to see pictures of brand new babies. You can see my largest was my second, Bailey. She was a chunker at 9 pounds, but this is Ella, Bailey, and then Rory. Okay, newborn babies. All babies are born with a number of reflexes. These are unlearned, involuntary responses that occur automatically. Remember, reflexes, we said, happen with those interneurons. They don't go to the brain. It just happens automatically. So the reflexes that babies are born with, the rooting reflex is the baby will automatically turn their head when their cheek is touched. That's why you're not supposed to touch a baby's face. Well, other reasons too, but one of the reasons is touching the baby's face. They think there's food, and so they'll turn their face towards that cheek. And the sucking reflex, so anything that touches the face or the lips, a baby will try and suck on it, so whether it be your finger, a pacifier, etc. The startle reflex, this is often called the Moro reflex, M-O-R-O, and this is when the baby flings their arms back, and it's kind of like they think that they're being dropped, so when their head goes back, their reflex is that they're falling, and so they put their hands out and their arms out. You'll often see it during loud noises or when they're being set down. And then the Babinski reflex. This is when our toes fan out when the edge of the sole of the foot is stroked. So it happens in newborns as well as patients who are brain dead. These reflexes are lost after a few months of age. You'll see them go away, and then they're replaced by more complex behaviors where babies have awareness of what they are doing.